Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Fan Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Uh-huh. So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
If you're a fan of comic books and comic book conventions, Daytona Beach Comic Con needs to be on your list of must-attend events. It's a show that actually focuses on comic books. Imagine that! This year's event is happening on Saturday, September the 6th, and Sunday, September the 7th. Silverline creators will be there, so we'll see you at the show. There's a new convention in town, and it's sure to be mega fun without the mega expense. Comics, toys, collectibles, pop culture. ShadowCon, Saturday, February 1st, 2025 in Orlando, Florida. Silverline creators will be there, so we'll see you at the show. If you find yourself in the Orlando area, and let's be honest, doesn't everyone come to Orlando for the House of Mouse? Head over to Coliseum of Comics to get your comic book fix. Be sure to check out their location on East Colonial Drive, where they carry a wide selection of independent comics, including Silverline books. Stop by and don't forget to tell them Silverline sent you. Hey, if you're an independent comic creator looking to get your comic printed, look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our comics and do a fantastic job. They can even print special edition covers. When you reach out to them, be sure to tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Kilber, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday nights as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to That's the One Show on Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim TK, and I'm joined, as always, by Jose Fuentes.
Hello, everybody.
Ron Fortier.
Greetings, all.
And David Rios.
Hello.
And tonight we're going to be talking about using stuff from real-life history in your comics. In particular, talking about weapons and vehicles, since they're prominent in the ongoing pre-order campaign we have going on for Silverline. I actually have a screen to share here once I press all my buttons. All right, here we are. Boom, buttons pressed. And thank you, Pops, for the endorsement. We appreciate it. But yes, currently going on is Wolf Hunter number 2, my World War II Secret History spy comic. We're over halfway up our pre-order goal and have until February 4th, so there's still time to get your pre-orders in. I would appreciate it if it did so. It is a secret history story about essentially the technology war of World War II. German spies in England steal some prototype technology, and then it's up to a recently recruited counterintelligence officer stuck in a room full of liars to figure out which one is the liar he needs to apprehend. And imagine if you will, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy meets a little bit of planes, trains, and automobiles or Dunkirk. So it's a good time. If I'm used to it myself, I had a lot of fun writing it, and I hope you all enjoy it as well. The one of our exclusive things, the original art from Dean Zachary, has already been bought.
Nice.
So if yes, however, if you want to get, I think it might have actually been Ryan got it. But if you want to get the original inks by Tommy Flormonti, of course known as co-founder of Kablam, those are still available. Our team here, Ray Fujiwara, Martin Turner, Raga, Mike Belger, they're all fantastic, and I enjoyed what they've done to kind of bring the story to life. And I think it makes for one of the most visually distinct, as well as like emotionally thought out World War II stories. So enough about tooting my own horn. I got to toot Ron's horn for a little bit here before we get into it. So I didn't get a link from you, Ron, but I believe you do have a Kickstarter that is going live, correct?
It's going to go live. We're maybe a couple days away right now. I'm going to be meeting with the artist Zane the Gain sometime tomorrow afternoon to look at the Kickstarter package he's put together. And like I said, I'm looking at maybe at least definitely by the end of the week, by Friday, it will be up at Kickstarter. And it's my first ever Western series, which I'm really excited about. It's one of these crazy things that came about at a convention a couple of years ago. I was doing a panel and basically threw it out to the audience about, okay, so what do I write next? And I had a notepad and a pen. And I says, what would you guys like to see? Throw out genres and whatever, right? And ultimately, Westerns. People started yelling Westerns. Do a Western. Do a Western. So, okay, fine. Yeah, I love Westerns. I'd love to tackle that. So it was like, okay, so we're doing a Western. All right, so who's the antagonist? Or who's the protagonist? Who's the antagonist? And this audience literally filled out all the details. Gave me my protagonist, which is a female bounty hunter. Gave me the outlaw gang that she's after, et cetera, et cetera. And I took all this data, came back home, and shaped it into a plot. And luckily, as it turns out, one of our Fort Collins neighbors here, as I said, is a former Kubert School graduate himself, Zane the Gain, and we've become good friends over the years. And I knew Zane had an itch to do a Western comic. Now, keep in mind, guy's name is Zane, right? Zane Grey. It's just like maybe his dad was a Western fanatic when he was born or whatever, but that's his name. So one night when he and his wife and my wife and I went out to dinner, we got to talking, and I said, "Hey, Zane, I'm working on a Western comic miniseries. Any chance you'd like to look at the first script, which I just finished by then?" And he said, "By all means." He got excited. He said, "Send it to me." And man, I was keeping my fingers crossed because I've seen Zane's work, and it is stunning. It is absolutely beautiful.
That's awesome.
And sure enough, within 24 hours, he emails me and says, "Man, this is awesome. I got to draw this." And so that was it. We shook hands, and off we go. It's going to be published via his own little independent company, which is called Pulp Fiction. All right. And like I said, the first issue is 24 pages long. He's finished it. The Kickstarter, like I said, fingers crossed, goes up by Thursday or Friday. And our idea is basically to do it in black and white at a certain money level. If we get that and go up another $1,000, it's going to be in full color. So once people check out the Kickstarter site, and like I said, hopefully next week when we get together, I'll have a link for everybody, and I'll be posting that all over Facebook or whatever. But trust me, this thing is begging for color, and we're going to have a couple of pages up on the Kickstarter in full color, so folks can see it. But I sent Tim a JPEG of the cover because I wanted people to see what Zane did. So Tim, if you want to put that up.
Okay, let's see. I didn't see anything come through my messages. They send it over email?
Yep.
Okay, you did. Okay, perfect. There it is. Let me pull this up on full screen. Boom, boom.
Yeah.
There she be.
Yes. That's so big.
The series is called Hamlet's End. And that name is the name of a hidden outlaw camp, which ultimately is the quest of our protagonist. It's a basic old-fashioned Western revenge yarn. Her parents are killed by an outlaw gang. She grows up, eventually to become a bounty hunter, and is obsessed with finding them. And ultimately, as you go through the series, she comes to find out that there's this hidden outlaw gang. You know, if you saw Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid or whatever, they have the old hole in the wall and that kind of stuff. But someplace in Arizona is this outlaw town called Hamlet's End. And by the time we get to the end of the miniseries, that's where she's going to end up. And trust me, I am doing this as a slam bang shoot 'em up, just like the old Western cowboy movies. And just, you know, you look at that cover and the art, it's just stunning. Zane is absolutely terrific. It's only a matter of time before people find this kid and he becomes a big name in this industry. I'm really excited about this. So thanks.
Yeah. So Sarah in the chat, nice to have you with us. It sounds like it's your first time with the Tuesday show. So typically we do pretty educational focused topics. We try to hit on sort of the craft of comic creation, which then gets chopped up, recorded, and shot out to podcast services around the world. So if you're listening to those services after the fact, we appreciate you. Please leave a review, share it with a friend. But we're glad to have you with you. If you have any questions related to the topic, we try to get them as they come in. If they're unrelated questions, we do them at the end of the show. And on that note, Ron and I both have historical comics coming out, and there's a few days of difference here. So what you need to do is you need to go in and get your pre-order of Wolf Hunter 2 in now. So in your pay posts, Wednesday or Thursday night, and Ron's comic goes live, you know, then you're good to go. You're good to go. You know, you're not double dipping if you get in 2 separate pay periods.
There you go.
Yeah. I like where your mind's at, Tim.
Yeah, you too. Way to go.
So yeah, we got let me see here. So yes, we had Ron's cover. We had I can't remember the name of the manufacturer, but you had the classic cowboy breech load shotgun, which is sort of iconic for anything Western, right?
Oh yeah, totally.
And let me see if I can get a zoom in on here. We'll be mentioning these as we go through, but on Wolf Hunter 2, we also got the British 45 caliber service revolver, as well as the classic. Well, these are actually like outdated by the time the war began, but I can't remember the name of the exact model. But they're steam engines that were outdated, but ended up getting run because they just needed every single ounce of logistics they could get, as well as our German Messerschmitts and Stukas that were famous for the Blitz. All right, and very cool. Okay, so getting into tonight's topic, Ron and I both have obviously have books out or about to be out that feature historical vehicles and weapons, and you can also include horses in, I guess, vehicles, because if you want to get really historically accurate with it, there was different breeding. I don't know what you call it. The horses were bred differently back in the day than they are now, and there's even a difference in size compared to everybody. Horses have just gotten progressively bigger over the ages, which is a weird thing to think about. The fact that war horses back in the olden times were actually several hands shorter than a horse now. Jose, of course, has done his own weird Western.
Very weird.
Yes. And so, David, I guess I got to grab kind of your take on this first, because I imagine the three of us will have quite a lot to talk about when it comes to historical armaments and whatnot. When it comes to historical fiction or historical comics, have you had a lot of experience coloring or working with elements of that type? I know with Kalis you got some more modern art equipment, but when it comes to coloring historical features, what are some of your thoughts there? And if you don't really have a lot of experience as an enjoyer of comics, how much is historical accuracy kind of in your mind when you're reading them?
I haven't had a lot of experience actually coloring a lot of that. Most of the stuff I was doing was all superhero stuff at the time, current times. So if it was, Ultraverse stuff, it was, modern day, and most of the things were for Marvel were either, the current era comics, your Spider-Man and stuff like that. But then, I kind of actually went the other direction because I was able to do some of the stuff from like the 2099, so the X Nation and things like that. So most of the stuff was rooted in new.
Yeah.
But when it comes to with historical accuracy and all of that, when I do see, things like Westerns or even, maybe not even going back that far, things that are set maybe in the 60s and stuff like that, going through and seeing the when the artists go through and put the time period weaponry in it, I think is something that really boosts the scene. I mean, the last thing you want to do is try and have a Western that has a Tommy gun or something in it,
Right.
where it's like, no, that kills, detracts from it. But, that's one thing, I hear with Rob Davis is, he likes to go through and pull a lot of reference material and draw, real, accurate weapons and things like that when he does it. So I really enjoy that, and playing to that. I think, as with Ron's example that he had up there, looking at the coloring, that whole, Western brown, dark brown, stuff like that, a lot of that stuff incorporating color wise in that is, if you're doing into weapons and all that stuff, yeah, you're gonna, if I were to approach that, I would be doing things like a lot of weathered colors, a lot of, maybe, well, we know that materials for guns were done, in a lot of them had like a blue point film on them. So, kind of trying to keep that stuff, but also, back then, it's not as much of a well-oiled unit like your modern day thing. So probably incorporate some things like some surface rust and things like that. Maybe the wood that's on it, maybe try and give it, like maybe a splintered, well-used look, things like that. And I think the only time that you would kind of counter that is if you have somebody who's an elaborate, like a villain who just thinks that they are, if anybody's going to have a bright, shiny, reflective silver gun or a gold-plated gun, it's going to be a villain that's so full of himself that he believes that it's owed to him.
The man with a golden gun.
Yeah, that type of
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
So I would, that's something I would take into effect is trying to, kind of do the everyman thing where, stuff gets used and, color wise and try and portray that type thing.
Yes. I think it's kind of interesting too. Bash Stampede. And we're doing pretty well, Mr. Self-Destruct. Thanks for asking. Hope you're doing as well. And yeah, Bash Stampede is also a great example of kind of using everyman gun and also using historical weapons, but set in a futuristic context. It's a good anime. if anyone hasn't watched Trigun. But kind of almost like as a counter to that point, not in that I've said before that when you're making something that has some sort of basis in reality, you need to adhere to the triangle of weird, right? And that at least one of your points of contact needs to be accurate, and then you can get weird on the other 2 points. Or if you have 2 points that are accurate, you can get really weird on the third point. So like with Wolfhunter, I talked about this before, but the fact that we use impressionistic coloring, right? It's done like a Euro comic, where we use a lot of sort of color blocks or non-realistic shadows, right? Or different gradients to kind of emote the emotion or the immediate, mental presence in that scene as opposed to the objective reality of it. So kind of we have this moment here where we have a hurricane being shot down. And so, of course, the colors are completely different. They're not actual, it's not the actual livery that a hurricane's painted with, and that's not the color that we'll get. But instead, the way we go about it is the way that the silhouette is constructed is much more naturalistic to the actual silhouette of a hurricane as opposed to being made more impressive for a comic, kind of a little more boxy. And then we show exactly where the smoke could be coming out if the engine's failing. So using points of realism to get buy-in, essentially. And so I think you can kind of hit these different things where if you have a very realistic, colored gun with a very detailed and realistic color pattern on it or livery on it, you can then maybe get away with some other part of the story because the buy-in on the weapon is already the buy-in to the weapons in your story in general is already so present. I think that's also something if you want to take this over to something like movies, like looking at something like John Wick, where there's so much love put into the gunsmithing of that series that then we kind of give them pass on the action choreography because the way that they do their weapon detailing is so accurate.
Yeah, I mean, all the props have as much, or can potentially, depending on their value in the story, can have as much of a punch as a character. Not the main character, but possibly some of the background characters and stuff like that. So, you kind of think of, kind of a off the wall reference is, think of, the Batmobile.
Mm-hmm.
It could have just been a car to get him from A to B, but it was designed to the point where it had a personality. So a lot of the things that you go through and put, whether it's weapons or if it's a Western, if it's wagons or horses, you can really go through and boost that up and give it its own personality.
Yeah,
to give a little more of a dimension. So,
well, it's really an element that definitely depends on research. And you were talking about, Dave, about Rob earlier, and working with Rob is one of the things that I learned a long time ago. Rob loves researching, weapons, clothing, machines that fit the part of whatever story you're doing. And we're working right now on a series that basically has a lot of references back in time to the Roman Empire. And I can remember writing one page where I needed to show a Roman legion, walking across, the savannah in northern Africa. And, I sent that off to Rob. Well, when I get the pages back, there's never a question in my mind. I look at the soldiers and the armor they have on and the helmets, all right? And Rob is so, meticulous in doing his research, the spears and whatever, that even to the point of the swords, right? Romans usually had a short sword. They didn't have this long thing like you'd see like Zorro or whatever, all right? It was for close infighting and pikes and these kind of things. So he's always authentic of what he does with his research. Now, we were talking about the Western I'm doing with Zane the Game. Well, again, one of my, lucky pieces with doing this with Zane, of all people in the world, is Zane is an active shooter. Okay, he loves to go target shooting. All right, he and his wife own some acreage on the Colorado-Wyoming border, and they go target shooting all the time. And he's extremely personally familiar with weaponry, rifles and handguns. So literally, when I was writing my script, at one point I described one of the characters having a cult peacemaker. And sure enough, right, when I got the finished pages back, I'm looking at the artwork, and Zane goes, "Oh," he said, "I changed the handgun." And I went, "Oh," he says, "Post-Civil War, they would have had a Navy cult, wouldn't have been a peacemaker." And sure enough, there it is, and it's authentic. You look at that gun in her hand, and it's the real thing. Tim brought up the shotgun. Well, that's an old shotgun that Zane's grandfather used to have and taught him how to shoot with.
Nice.
All right, so again, things are authentic, and it adds because, hey, come on, guys, we all know, all right, whatever comic you put out there, ultimately there's going to be people who know the difference.
Yeah.
Right, and they will catch it. All right, if you're faking it and you're using something that you don't know anything about and you didn't do your homework, you're going to get a letter saying, "Hey, that wasn't invented back then," or "They didn't use that kind of thing," et cetera, et cetera. So it's a two-edged sword in and of itself. You better do your homework. You better have artists who know how to do their homework and do their research. But you can even go the other way, because I love David bringing up the Batmobile. All right, because I got to tell you guys this is too funny. Is when I was doing the Green Hornet for Now Comics and working with Jeff Butler. All right, well, part of the whole gig with the Green Hornet is one of the tools he uses. He's got the electric, cattle prod shotgun, thing. He zaps people with. That's one thing, the stinger. But he's got the gas gun.
Yep.
Right. Well, there's no such thing. All right.
Yep.
So sure enough, Jeff Butler has to literally invent something that looks like it would be an effective gas gun. And he ends up doing, as I recall, the piece that he drew was almost like a modified Luger with a long barrel, so that under the barrel were tubes and one line. And instead of, bullet, at the end of the barrel, you got a spray. So each tube had like little chemicals of gas that would become gas when it hit, the oxygen, the air or whatever. But it looked authentic for something that's totally make believe. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think, Ron and I work in interesting parallels because when it comes time to do this one, or when we do the next Beyond the Stars, we'll talk about doing space fantasy and space epics, because I'm also working on Soul Ascendant with Alex Gallimore. Essentially is a space opera, but taking the idea of Roman mythology and making it literal, right? All the planets are actually gods, and the people who have colonized them are now subject to their domain. Absurdist idea, like I'm having people throwing like elemental spears in space, right? And like we're having like god battles outside of like spaceships, right? As there's like fleets fighting, they're like demigods fighting alongside them. So there's a lot of weird already just in the general premise and then the actions happening. So I did a lot of research on Roman legalities and the legal system of Rome. Because I wanted that to be grounded. So there,
Right.
the Roman Senate is accurate represented, and all the gods' interactions are all based off how they perceive each other, based on like the mythology as well as the legal system that the gods gave to the Romans. Evangelion is great, but and so. And that kind of gives rise to the core conflict of the comics, the fact that there is a conspiracy because the gods love their secrets and hiding from each other. And one god breaks that and ends up stepping on someone else's toes. And that causes the core conflict and why the gods now start fighting each other, is because someone has broken the law of domain, which for them was very sacred. Fun fact, to the point where in Rome, you could not declare war without having a priest of Bologna or Mars go to the border of the country you're going to war with and throw a spear across their land to say this is now the domain of Bologna. So what had happened is at one point they were going to go with one of the Grecian states, but they had given up a lot of their colonies over there. So they had found a citizen from this other Grecian state, sold him property in the land, and then had a priest throw a spear into the front yard I'd say like, great, we've declared war legally. Yes, and Jose and David, who you guys ever want to share what you're working on, I'd love to see it. But first, I do also point out, there we go.
Nice.
All right.
Some Future Commandos work from Jose.
Yeah. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
There we go.
Perfect.
That's all right. Yeah.
And kind of to working with Rob Davis, another historical comic that I'm working on with Rob Davis right now, which I've already announced and should be out later this year. Rob Davis finished his pencils, and now we're just finishing up inks, and I should have issue 2 over to Rob sometime soon.
Issue 2 of Gulliver's Travels. Oh, just kidding.
Of Dracula. And of course, this is Bram Stoker's Dracula, so it came in accurate to the book as opposed to the movie. And part of the book is the fact that Dracula pretty much confirms that he is an immortal that has been fighting in the Balkans for forever, essentially. And so there's a wonderfully painted image of how Dracula pictures himself as the warrior atop the heads of foreign invaders. So I wanted to actually have that shown in the comic in the moment where Harker is realizing who this man is that he's staying with. And so, speaking of Rob researching here, if I can zoom in. No? All right, Facebook's gone weird. But we actually have Dracula with a curved Vulcan broadsword or hand sword, a breastplate with the black dragon of his house. But also, so the headpiece is actually, Vlad the Impaler, Vlad Tepes, his actual headpiece that he wore in all of his ceremonial paintings, and we would have assumed that he had ceremonial mail attached to it. So even just in a moment where it's a character perceiving themselves and this understanding, you have this moment where Rob actually goes ahead and gives him Vlad Dracula's actual headpiece and the actual way they would have essentially dressed if you're wearing ceremonial armor.
Right. That's giving you the extra bit that most readers probably wouldn't even expect.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, does it add!
Yeah.
All right, to the visuals, to the storytelling, everything. All right, it's just
Also,
you go the extra mile,
And we are giving Dracula the mustache because, like Robert Eggers, if you have a vampire, it's got to have the mustache.
Anybody that has researched or even curiously done any Google search of Vlad Tepes, you have Dracula and whatnot, you're going to get the pictures of him in his armor with the the headpiece on. So so it's one of the first pictures that pops up, one of there's a painting and then there's a drawing of it that shows up first and foremost. So anybody that does any of the research, if you go to the Wikipedia page for Dracula and whatnot, it's going to show the sketch drawing of him with his headgear on. So to put that in, do the research and put that into the comic, that in there, so it's visually, stark, so people see it, it's striking, oh yeah, dude, that's freaking Dracula, because I recognize that. You may not be oh, that's from blah 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 this time period, but you're gonna I remember seeing him wear that in this picture over here.
Yep.
So you're making those connections, people that even just like I said, just haphazardly find it online. You're making those connections.
Yes. Also, the suits and the formal wear of the time, a lot of work on that as well as the trains and the steamboats. Which, if you read the books, that the steamboats play a huge part in the story of Dracula. We've never gotten a movie. And there's the back third of the book is a steamboat chase.
Right.
Wow.
So we wanted to really get in there, and that's going to be something that's done accurately as well. Of course, being an artist or a writer like I am means that I constantly torture my artists, as I did with Wolf Hunter, the first issue, where I give them a bunch of establishing shots, which are the facades of historical buildings. If you remember the Wolf Hunter Christmas special, he made Quentin Bedwell. I sent Quentin Bedwell an image of the BBC after it had been bombed by mines. So he drew the facade of the BBC as it's covered in camouflage targeting.
Yep.
So we have the facades of Castle Dracul, as well as some of the other places that the Cliffs of Dover also at the end of issue 1.
Yeah, I remember Quentin showing us what was it, the interior to the cathedral that he had done.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
it's absolutely insane. And that was also interesting because that was a moment where the cathedral they wanted to use, of course, no longer exists, and there was no photography allowed to be taken in it essentially for the time that it was around. So, in order to do something like, essentially we got another image of a cathedral that's in the same the same county, and then made changes based on the written description of that cathedral that we could find. So, and hopefully the result of that is that we get a faithful recreation of what an image of that cathedral might have looked like. Yeah.
So you got reference and improvisation.
Yeah, reference and inference. Yeah. Which, if you're working with,
I tell you, sometimes I don't know about you, Tim, but I listening to your comments. Yeah, we're on the same track. I mean, I realized a long time ago that in writing anything, all right, that has an historical background whatsoever, or even is an actual thing in the world today, right? I always look for visual references online, and we live in an age now, right? There, everything's here. Wikipedia, Google. I mean, you can research anything within a matter of minutes online. Unlike, when I first started out in the business and being as old as Methuselah here is, often many trips to the local library, all right? And hopefully finding some books or references, and sometimes you couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I basically, like I said, I'm writing a series now, a spy thriller series that takes place all around the globe, okay? And basically the idea is anytime I use a different locale for one of the scenes, I go online and find photo references for that town, for that city, for that place, for that airport, if that's where we're going to start, the scene or whatever. And I download literally 20, 30, 40 pictures per script that I do and send them to my artist. All right, and say, here you go. I mean, if you want to find your own stuff, by all means, but here, let me help. Okay, and trust me, most artists are like, wow, thanks a lot. This makes things a whole lot easier,
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, one of the things I totally always recommend to young writers coming into the business. All right, get photo references. It's one thing to have it in your head, to write it in the script and whatever. But if you're using something real, then get photo references and send them to your artists, all right? Mm-hmm. So that it gives them a step up, all right? When they get to that page or whatever and can do something authentic. And that, hey.
Yeah.
I have a folder on my computer, and in that folder, there's got to be at least 20 other separate folders because I have male reference, female reference, animal reference, building reference, cloud references, you know what I mean? Airplane references. I think I have horses reference, even though I'm not that good at drawing, but I have to have them anyway.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just my computer, like hard drive probably is like.
Yeah. One of the first things I ever wrote was basically a hero type, urban hero type series when I first broke into the business. And the idea was, it was a martial artist who was sick to death of drugs and infiltrating his neighborhood. And by day, he was a high school English teacher and was watching drugs basically corrupt, the kids in his school and whatever. And so he becomes this masked vigilante and goes after him. But at one point, realizing that, even with his own martial arts skills and carrying nunchucks or whatever around, he might need some firepower. Okay. Now, I mean, I'm writing this in the age of Clint Eastwood and, 44 Magnums and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and my thought processes was, well, you know what? I want to make this guy really a decent human being. All right. I mean, he wants to kick these drug people out of his neighborhood. All right. But he doesn't want to go out and be a badass or be as bad as they are. All right. And the more I kept thinking about it, wait a minute. And my solution to that, developing his character was, He literally goes out and gets and learns how to use a 22 caliber target pistol. Okay, that even if he misshoots somebody, he's not going to do a hell of a lot of damage. All right, and I got pictures of this particular handgun and sent it to my artist and said, again, okay, don't give him a 45, don't give him a Magnum or nothing. This is a target pistol, and I want people who read the comic to know that's all it is. That's all he's using to deter the bad guys. Mm-hmm. So it becomes a tool and a part of the story.
Yeah, and I find like one of the things I usually end up doing, like if I'm doing something that has a lot of reference, the first thing I always say when I'm working with an artist is like, do you want me to create a Pinterest board that I've been working with? Do you want me to send that to you? Most of the time they say yes, because then that allows us to create a uniform form of visual communication. But
it is easier for you to create the murder board, right, of what you see in your mind when you're writing it than it is for me as an artist to go and just find stuff I think is cool, but might not be relative to the story that you're writing. So I guarantee you every artist is gonna be like, yes, writer, please send me a board.
Yeah, the one interesting conversation I had was with Soul Ascendant, working with Alex Gallimore, where our conversation turned into, because we were also nerdy about the same games, and so it turned into, so what's our visual like identity? Is like late Republic Rome meets Destiny 2. He says, I know exactly what you're thinking about. Let me get back to you.
Right.
And we ended up getting some really nice, like essentially scallop armor inspired space armor, and using like actual like elemental Roman pila, and
it would make for good architecture too. Good like classic sci-fi architecture.
Yes,
like combining the two together, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I mean the first issue we go through, we get a little bit of space stuff, and like the spaceships are inspired a little bit by the Expanse. Want to be realistic with how we're having Roman space gods, so I want the science behind the spaceships to be realistic. So no faster than light travel. Everything is like, first off, like our basic understanding of how you get thrust gravity, right?
See, that's one of the pieces of the triangle.
One of the pieces of the triangle, right? But then we end up going into what a place known as the World Grave and the Halls of Terra and Fulkin's Forge and all this other stuff, where it's kind of like these grander, like bigger than life things. And I understand like how the gods work, but then you have the humans in the same space being constrained by, we need the ship to be going in order to actually be able to stand on the deck. If the ship stops, then you have to put on like magnetic boots, otherwise you float off. I mean that's the great thing about if you're taking your time to be accurate with creating comics or even any sort of media, is it allows you to create a shared understanding of the subject in a way that is naturally, because that's the way we learn the language, right? Is our first language isn't learned by like written memorization. It's by our parents speaking at us and then us kind of assimilating what those words mean, what they do. And a lot of our
flying shoe helps too.
Yeah. And so essentially the way that being accurate with comics or factual material in a comic is it creates this sort of learning by experience by proxy. We kind of talked a lot about weapons here, so we can move on to vehicles in our last like 15 minutes or so. Now, obviously, the thing that Westerns, Dracula, and World War II all have in common is a lot of trains.
Trains
and
horses.
Trains and horses. And that's also something like I don't know how much of a consideration it is when it comes to like writing or illustrating a horse set in a Western setting, but a horse back then, especially if it's like, an average bounty hunter's or cowboy's horse, is going to look much different than like a Mustang is going to look a lot different than like a modern thoroughbred used in racing, right, or like a war horse in medieval times, and the size is going to be different. So even something as mundane as a horse, there's going to be changes in consideration based on how it presents based on the time period.
Or you would have to factor in the saddle would be different, right? The bedding, or not bedding, but the blankets and covers that they have, any kind of like accoutrement that the horses would have, from that time period. So like, you figure Dracula, they would definitely have more clothing, more ornamental things hanging off the horse, as opposed to a Western, which, it's bare necessities, just blankets, saddled, and you know what I mean, and strap it up and go. You know what I mean? There's not a whole lot of like ceremonial dress for a horse in a Western.
Yes. Mr. Subject, there's actually a funny story as to why war elephants were banned. And it wasn't necessarily just because of Carthage. It was because of how poorly war elephants behaved in actual battles. They're very easily spooked. So one of the battles in which they're deployed by the Carthaginians, the fog rolled in early over the day. So what had happened is Romans just got their skirmishers up to the front line. They broke their formation, had skirmishers at the front, spooked the elephants before the battle started. The elephants turned and ran through the Carthaginian ranks. Broke the Carthaginian army, and they routed before the battle began. This was not Hannibal. This is I think this was the Third War, but that was. I think there's only like very few generals that actually deployed war elephants effectively. Hannibal being one of them, of course. Very like notably and historically, Hannibal being probably the best,
right,
one to use that technology. But and Sarah mentioned earlier bazookas, but also something you need to mention when we're talking about historical technology or science or vehicles is there's also sometimes flaws to them, or the way that things needed to be handled in certain ways. And I think it was it Fury that had, I think in the Fury ambush scene, I believe they had a Panzerschreck attack. It was either Fury or something else, but think of bazookas, but not like video games like Medal of Honor or Call of Duty. If you're using a bazooka or something like that, you're using one person is using the gun and you're firing enough shots repeatedly, right? However, in reality, it was a team weapon, so you had two people loading, and often what happened is you fire off one shot, then switch to your small arms and move position. Because trying to reload that thing while you have a tank column coming down on you is not the best for your health. And so in Fury, that moment where you have this Panzerschreck attack where they launch and you see like the smoke trails and the fact that they're not perfect lines, they had like bumps and stuff because there's small rockets carrying the same, and they're adjusting for air and misfiring. And then it switches over to the machine guns and everything else, and then a tank destroyer firing. The Panzerschrecks are done at this point because everyone's switching over to weapons that are much more effective. So understanding also how things are deployed and how you would account for things shortcomings, like if you're firing a bazooka, your bazooka team's going to fire that and then switch over to their Garands and then run for cover. They're not going to stay in that position that's already been exposed and marked by the fact that a smoking chemtrail came flying out of it and something exploded. Yes. Okay. I feel like I've kind of talked at length here for a lot of different things. So no one else have any other thoughts or ideas you want to throw in there?
I think the whole idea with vehicles, and it makes me laugh to a degree, because this is my own research in writing a lot of pulp short stories over the last couple of years, and a lot of the pulp era stuff would literally take place between World War I and World War II. Okay. And so aside from writing that, I've edited a lot of that kind of fiction before. And I always find it interesting because one of the first things I learned when I was researching the time periods was the fact that, one of the classic vehicles, all right, that you immediately identify with an army and the World War theaters of operation, whether in the Pacific or Europe, was the American Jeep. All right. Well, that was created specifically during World War II for combat theater. Well, I'm reading a story set in 1938, 1939, 1940, and the writer's got people driving around in Jeeps, and I'm like, no. There is no Jeeps in 1940. There wasn't a Jeep until after World War II began, because that's when the military realized they needed a short, fast-moving vehicle. Up until then, all you had was troop carriers, these 2-ton things, right? Aside from the tanks and the heavier equipment stuff, but they needed something smaller and shorter that could go through rough terrain, mud and creeks and wooded areas and whatever. You get back to the American automotive industry in Detroit, and military said, this is what you need. What can you give us? And a lot. The American Jeep is born, right. And it becomes a brand name, and it's still going strong today.
Yeah, and that's also something that not about terrain comfort. Yeah, they were not great. They were strictly tools of necessity. It's like in Wolf Hunter #1, there's a moment where the pilot recovery medics that would pick up the pilots from crashed planes after the dogfights in the Blitz, they come through and they pick up Willard in an American Jeep, because Britain at the time, they were getting Jeeps via Lend-Lease. They couldn't manufacture their own, and it wasn't cost effective for them to start new lines of production when they're already spending so much time on planes and their own tanks. So it's like, hey, you have some of those vehicles, we're just going to take a bunch of them from you and hope to pay you back after the war.
Oh yeah, and you got to be authentic. You have to be authentic with again, not vehicles, but definitely aircraft.
Yeah,
aircraft, definitely. All right.
Yeah.
Because trust me, all right. There is a huge contingent of aviation buffs in this country, still to this day. All right, and I've gone to numerous air shows back in New England, here in Colorado, whatever, right, and seeing refurbished B-24s and P-38s and those kind of things, right? And people know what they are. People know what those aircrafts are, when they were developed, when they were used, et cetera, et cetera. So again, whatever you're doing comic-wise, and I've mentioned this before, growing up in the 50s, reading war comics from especially DC did some of the best whatsoever. But the majority of those things were done by veterans.
Yeah.
You'd come back, all right? And so what you saw in the vehicles and aircraft were all authentic. The weapons, the rifles, everything. Sergeant Rock and Easy Company, and that that steel helmet that he wore. All right. I mean, I had no clue what that thing is when you put it on your head until I got into basic training, because basic training is still that same steel pot. All right. And man, that thing feels like a ton after you've had it on your head all day. Especially if you're out there in the hot sun doing basic training, you cannot wait to take that damn thing off your head.
Right. Now what there is that the ceramic, the Kevlar padded ceramic plates, which essentially is the same weight, but now it's just really snug on your ears, so the sweat gets stuck in there. And that was you also have to have this moment of reference and inference on kind of the personalities or the way people thought at the time, right? Whereas, the way that a commando thought during World War II was much different than they think now, but the same basic psychology is similar. So you can inference from the psychology, but we're having different considerations, right? There's different tools, there's different tactics, and different things being at play. And a lot of it comes down to understanding like the stuff that happens now, so in getting that if it's great if you get someone from the time period to give you actual testimony, but if you can't, then get testimony from period in this people in the similar line of work now, and then read accounts from that time. And that also does a lot for making sort of believable voices from your characters, right? Because if your character isn't believable at the time period, then that's also going to cause issues with the rest of the believability of your story.
Oh, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
Again, it's just if you're a writer, I mean, hopefully you're also a devoted reader.
Mm-hmm.
You get your hands on, whatever was out there historically.
Right.
And I mean, I have, a dozen books on World War II here in my office, from every facet of the war. Again, like, specific, like a book on the Flying Tigers, a book on special, Tim mentioned British commando raids. All right, those kind of things. All right. The more you read, the more you know, the more you learn. It just embellishes what you're writing, and add that voice that people understand, and makes some sense out of. All right. I can remember Chuck Dixon talking when I met him years ago, when both of us were breaking into the comic business, and I think Chuck's father had been in the Air Force, or his grandfather in World War II. And most likely his father, his father, but he was in aviation. And Chuck grew up hearing all those stories, all right, and loved that stuff. Well, I mean, ultimately, when he ends up, working, writing Airboy, all right, I mean, he just incorporated tons of that stuff.
Yeah.
His father, told him those stories and whatever, and was able to make it, appear, believable and authentic.
Yeah.
Again, personal experience and research, can't have enough of it.
Absolutely. And I think also then that gives you, when you understand more of that kind of, Ronnie, you made a point earlier that I'm trying to remember exactly how it worked, but my brain immediately went taking that into understanding how characters would then also perceive other characters at the time, which maybe like how we get to actually how like different vehicles and stuff behaved at the time, and you can use that to give your characters engaging traits, right? If they have a deeper understanding of something present in that time than the average person might have. Like Captain Willard, his whole thing is that he's a good wing commander because, or group captain, because he's able to memorize how a Messerschmitt, how a Stuka, how a Hurricane, how they all behaved, and then draw from, okay, if they're doing this, then that means that the counterplay to this is by, maneuvering this way, or if this plane isn't doing this thing, and I need to do this to fix it. And then that same skill set turns into them being a good spy hunter, because it's that same idea of looking at patterns, recognizing like behavioral traits, and then implementing the strategy to them.
Right.
And so, yeah, so if you're looking at the kind of the realism of how things behaved at the time, vehicles, weapons, whatever, and you give yourself a character who is an expert or a part of that, or any part of that, you can then give a character that's going to have some really good like interactions with the world around it that adds another level of engagement to them, right?
For sure.
Yes. Always think of see Clint Eastwood in westerns. It's not western, but Clint Eastwood, but Dirty Harry, right? He's so familiar with that handgun that he knows exactly how it's behave, what it's going to do, and at what range he's going to absolutely annihilate somebody.
Right.
To the point where that becomes part of his character trait.
Oh, for sure.
It's funny because when we were talking about the stuff initially, I was actually thinking of, when you're talking about the coloring and things with with Wolf Hunter, is thinking of the mix with the westerns, and I started thinking of Good, Bad, and the Ugly and stuff like that, and how you would approach that type of thing. So I was thinking very similar along the lines of a coloring style, similar to what Martin did on Wolf Hunter, but a different color palette. So you have a lot of those flats, gradients, stuff like that. But a lot more muted, a lot more, like maybe tans and browns and yellows and stuff like that. Not power yellows, not to the degree that he took, but that's another visualization I was thinking of when we were having that discussion earlier. So,
right. Yeah.
Clint Eastwood came up back then too. So,
well, I mean, we could talk on this subject for a long time. I mean, one of the things that I learned when I was in Vietnam was, and it's something a lot of people don't give a lot of thought to, all right, especially with rifles and whatever, right? The M16 was developed for Vietnam, and to phase out what had been used prior. The kicker is you get to a combat setting like a tropical jungle, and you really got to make sure you keep your weapon clean at all times, all right? And your ammunition will eventually have a limit to it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, basically, I'm losing the term now, but the quartermaster sergeants would have basically timestamps on when they would get boxes and boxes of ammunition for M16s, and they had to be used by a certain time. If you kept them for more than a month or so, they'd start to rust up. And the last thing you wanted was to get a bunch of guys out in the jungle with, a clip that's going to rust, in the breech and lock up your M16 in the middle of a firefight. So basically, they would, like, once a week, once every other week or whatever, go through all the ammunition in a company and take out everything that was expired and considered not reliable.
Yeah.
All right. This would all be collected, and no lie, because I've seen these things. These things would all be collected, and like every month or so, they would literally build a pile of expired ammunition from either bazookas or rifles or pistols or whatever, and they would detonate.
Yeah,
because it was again, it was too dangerous to use in combat, and just blow them up.
And too dangerous to leave around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally towers of expired ammunition that they would blow up.
Even just something as simple as understanding the physics of the ammunition and the weapons being used, or down to the reload count, can do a lot for the believability story, but also it adds another level of tension to it, because everyone, like the Jason Bourne movies, right, just firing bullets upon bullets without needing to reload, and it's kind of whatever. But then you get to the John Wick movies or Fury, gets to where they're having these fights, and all of a sudden you hear the click in the gun, or that they're like John Wick and he's an operator, he's counting his bullets, and he gets down to a point where then he has to find some other way to fight because he knows that he's in tight, reloading is going to take too long. So he throws a clip out, catches someone off guard with it, and then like hammers them with a bit of the gun. Things like that. So like if writing the comic, right, you don't necessarily need to get like a frame countdown on how many bullets you're expending per panel, but you can have, understanding if someone's firing a weapon, they'll probably need to reload before the page turns like that. And how is it going to affect the scene? Are they outnumbered and they need to find an alternative, or do like a quick tactical reload? You can have fun illustrating that, or are they going to find some way to change the dynamics of the encounter? Right? It's
exactly. Yeah, totally.
Mag drums,
yeah.
Mag drums for everything.
Was it? Yeah, given the Metal Gear Solid Infinity drum,
right.
It's an M16 fitted with 360 rounds. Yeah. But you can also get down to moments of this happens a bit, like in the jokes between, like, I've even gotten a little bit in Cable and Deadpool too, but like I understand like between like Cable and any other mercenary from like the modern world, like Deadpool or Wolverine, where he talks about like fighting with outdated weaponry, right? And you can do a real world parallel of that, of like Ron's saying, but like an M16. Eventually, that gets phased out, and the Army and the Air Force and everyone else switches to newer M14s or other types of weapons. The Marine Corps decides to stick to the M16 and invest all their money in different types of C4 and explosives. So then the Marine Corps, when they're going to things in Kuwait or Africa are moments where they're like suddenly trying to like trade with army guys and like, hey, look, I don't got enough chips for acquisition new weapons, so I'm going to trade you like so much of this for your gun because I'm going on patrol and you're not.
Yep. Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Because the reliability, you don't want something that jams on you because I mean, but if you do have a gun that jams and you understand like this is a gun that is prone for jamming, write that into your story because then the gun nuts are going to love that you included something like that. But also you get this point of environmental tension, environmental conflict that compounds onto your hero based on the world around them.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like every procedure in the army happened because someone died.
Right.
Yeah. There's a reason why there's a reason why claymores say face towards enemy. Yeah. Okay, well, this has been That's Our Show on Tuesday. We will be back next week with a topic which is on the calendar, which I have on my phone, which I'm pulling up now. Next week is going to be finding success in comics. So defining what your type of success looks like and how you can build an actual plan to get there. This has been using historical vehicles, weapons, details, and comics. And if you want to get some of that, head over to fundmycomic.com/wolfhunter2. We're also just on the front page there. And pre-order Wolf Hunter number 2. If you missed the first issue, you can add that on as an add-on or get the bundle that'll get you both issues. And it's about the same price as going into your friendly local store and picking up 2 Marvel or DC floppies. And you get to see some mix of historical realism with spy inference and Eurocomic style expressionism. I'm very happy with how this comic looks, how it turned out. So hope you enjoy it too. Make sure to keep your eyes out for Ron's comic coming out through Pulp Fission. And that will be ship up there. Yeah. Hamlet's End in the next couple of days. We'll be talking about it next week as well.
For sure. Right. Yeah. Hey, I mean, two good independent comics out there, people. Right. You know, hey, if you're tired of the same old, here you go.
Absolutely.
Posters, Ron, posters. I want that as a poster.
Oh, it is. By the way, it is. It is a poster.
Nice.
Zane has it, and I haven't seen, the layout for the Kickstarter. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. He's going to have that up on the Kickstarter site.
Right.
Because I have one of those.
Buddy, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, hook a brother up. Posters.
There you go.
Yeah. And Sarah asked, what happened if a tank... Imagine what happened if a tank turret jammed. You can look up, I think it's called turret flowering, turret blossoming.
Doesn't that happen? That's a thing.
That's a thing that's happened.
That's a legit thing, yeah.
Yeah, usually the main turret itself does not explode and pop off, but usually the barrel will then peel back like a flower.
Yeah.
And then if you're outside the wire, you got to figure out how to get back real quick. Those are currently available or will be available soon. Please go pre-order Wolf Hunter 2, and hopefully, Wolf Hunter 3, if that has success as well, I'll then be able to go on and do comics about the Warsaw Uprising and Operation Ham and Jam and a whole bunch of other fun spy stories set in this alternate version of World War II.
Right.
Tim, where's the reward for if you pay for everything? I will body slam someone through a table. What reward tier is that?
No. If you send me a screenshot saying that you got Tommy's art plus an additional $100 in an add-on, just send me a screenshot of that with your receipt, and the next time I'm in Orlando, I will body slam someone. Might be Jose, might be Roland. We'll figure it out.
That's what I'm talking about. I'll take it. I'll take it for the team.
All right.
Yes. So thank you all for watching, and we'll be back next week. But until that time, make mine
Silverline.
Make mine Silverline.
We kind of got there.
Hi, I'm Greg Horn. Make mine Silverline.